Joining us now is Emily Jashinsky, host of After Party with Emily Jashinsky on MK Media. Emily, it is great to see you again. Let's start with Trump's federal crime crackdown in Washington, D.C. It seems to be triggering everyone who must be against making the city safer. Protesters have even taken to the streets demanding an end to the increased federal presence. Look at this.
We are the litmus test, and how we respond in this moment will determine how this federal takeover will play out in other cities. At the whistle of threat. Why has Bowser allowed D.C. to be a playground for white gentrifiers and developers at the expense of the native population?
So we say, DCAT, you say, fight back. DCAT, 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 fight back. DCAT. I said, let me hear y'all say, stick together. When we talk about freeing DC and defending DC and all these things, we have to talk about the solutions.
Yeah, just looking at some of those protesters there are people holding up the No King sign, some are shouting shame. Emily, of all the things you want to fight Donald Trump about, this one's bizarre to me, especially as this appears to be working. There hasn't been a murder in DC for 2 weeks.
Yeah, which sounds like a really low bar, but that's what we call good news here in Washington, D.C., with the fourth highest murder rate in the United States. Even though, as people say, it appeared the statistics were going down on crime, that the crime rate was going down over the course of the last year. The D.C. Police Union disputes that, but they do believe, just over the course of the last several days, that we are down. Actually, we're down on crime. I've lived here for over a decade. It does feel like there has been an improvement in the city, and those protests are largely not made up of people from some of the worst neighborhoods, the hardest hit neighborhoods in the city. Now, of course, every neighborhood in DC has been touched by crime. It was really, really high in the 90s and the early 2000s, but it has remained high for the federal city, for the capital of the United States of America. People have gotten used to it, but it is especially bad in some of the neighborhoods where you aren't seeing these massive protests. In fact, what you've heard from some of the people in those neighborhoods is that they'd actually like to see more. They would like to see more organization. They would like to see more federal help, and they'd probably like to see it for the long term too, not just on the temporary basis that Donald Trump's federal takeover is operating on right now. So yeah, the polling shows that some people here in DC disagree. Most people here in DC disagree with what Donald Trump is doing, but that's different than whether they think that something badly needs to be done. And every single person in the city, for the most part, will tell you something desperately needs to be done, even though some of them are too proud and anti-Trump to admit that.
Well, there you go. Now, the White House Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, says the results of the investigation into DC crime stats are going to shock the public when it's released, including that murders have been recorded as accidents. This is what he had to say today.
Additionally, and the president spoke about this before, we've uncovered, in the process of uncovering, a massive scandal in Washington, D.C. with the doctoring of crime stats. And the Department of Justice, under the Attorney General, is leading the effort to uncover this. But when we ultimately share the results, it will stun you. The extent to which, even though D.C. had the worst crime in America, honestly measured, it dramatically understated how bad it was. There's even accusations that murders and homicides were reported as accidents instead of murders. I mean, this is how severe the manipulation of the crime data has been in this city, and it will all be uncovered and it will all be brought to light.
Emily, I mean, you're in DC. How shocking is that to you that we're hearing that murders have been reported as accidents?
It's actually not surprising to me at all, because the city doesn't feel like it felt in the middle of the pandemic when things were really, really bad. But honestly, having lived here for over a decade, the numbers did not seem to reflect reality. And these investigations actually predated Donald Trump's federal takeover of DC. So the DC Police Union, again, which represents the union that represents people in the Metropolitan PD here in Washington, have said that this was going on for quite some time now. There's actually already steps taken in these investigations to suspend people who are suspected of manipulating the crime data. I doubt that DC is the only city experiencing this, but I hope that through this investigation, which has now taken on a much heightened sense of gravity because of the federal takeover, other cities are shown very clearly that this is going to come to light, that you cannot get away with hiding this information in the long term, because when you hide the information, it means that some of these progressive policing experiments that have played out in American cities over the last 10 years that have ended in disasters, so much so that even people like London Breed in San Francisco, where people were championing these policies, even here in DC, Mayor Muriel Bowser were championing some of these left-wing crime policies. Even they have had to admit that that was a bad idea because the experiment ran. But the more you can hide the information and obscure the information, the more you can get away with continuing to acquiesce to the activist class on the left.
Well, Chicago and New York City are set to be the next targets, I suppose, of Donald Trump's crime crackdown. There are reports that military officials are planning the deployment of a few thousand National Guard members to Chicago. Now, Chicago, of course, recorded more than 500 homicides last year, the most in the country. Yet Democrats like J.B. Pritzker and the governor of Illinois is fighting against this. Of course, they don't like anything that Donald Trump does. And I suspect, Emily, that we're going to see more protests, just like we've seen in D.C.
It's going to be, I think, actually even more extreme outside of DC, because DC has something called home rule, which allows the president, and this is all for good reason, by the way, this is the capital city. It's where the core seat of the federal government is. Well, all of these federal workers here, we have all of these people who work for our intelligence community, for our military, for, whether it's the Department of Energy, the Environmental Protection Agency, like some of the top leaders in the country work here. So it makes sense that you have the ability to step in and say the city is in an emergency condition of instability and safety is lacking. Now, on the other hand, we do have posse comitatus here in the United States, and a tradition that we don't allow the military to do civilian law enforcement. And so if the Trump administration can find a way around that, which is in legal limbo right now in Los Angeles, for example, if they can protect federal buildings, if they can protect federal officers, those sorts of things, they can come up with a legal rationale for it, possibly. And if that's the case, then they will absolutely do it. Donald Trump will absolutely do it. And the left is going to lose their mind on another level, because I think particularly the home rule doesn't exist in other cities.
Yeah, we'll stand by for that. Now, let's talk about Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He has been arrested by ICE officials. And just to recap, the DOJ says that he is a member of the El Salvadorian gang MS-13. He entered the United States illegally. He's also been accused by his wife, I should say, of beating her in the past. Now, the left have kind of painted him as this hard-working Maryland father. Now, he was set to be deported again, this time to Uganda, but a federal judge has blocked this. Just quickly before I get your take on this, Emily, the Democrats, they just love singing when they attend a protest, and they've been out wearing pink this time, singing as loud as they could, demanding the release of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Look at this.
Kilmar is our neighbor. You can't have him, Trump. No! Kilmar is our neighbor. You can't have him, Trump.
Yeah, I'm actually lost for words. I don't even know what to make of that kind of protest. But Emily, this case has been drawn out. It's been a bit of a flashpoint for the Trump administration. What's your take on the developments so far, and what's likely to happen here?
I mean, that video would be offensive if it weren't so hilarious.
Yeah.
That is just a great flavor of some of these protests. But there are, I think, some legitimate process concerns about Kilmar Abrego Garcia first ending up in El Salvador's CICOT detention center. That said, there's a difference between saying maybe the Trump administration made a mistake, which the administration actually admitted at one point in the legal process. Maybe the Trump administration made a mistake. That's one thing. But to then lionize Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who has been accused by his wife, as you mentioned, of spousal abuse and also of human trafficking, and who entered the country illegally and then cooked up a very flimsy asylum case. I mean, actually, Kilmar Abrego Garcia is the poster boy for the type of person who the Trump administration is looking to deport, and even a type of person that most Americans would tell you, yes, probably should be deported. He is the poster boy. And the fact that there are so many people, I think, on the far left that are not just saying, okay, kill Abrego Garcia, some legal mistakes were made. They're saying this man is a martyr. Even some mainstream Democratic senators like Chris Van Hollen of Maryland are lionizing and martyrizing Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And that is so completely out of touch with where most of the country is. And it's immoral, too.
Yeah, it's completely insane. Look, I want to talk to you about Gavin Newsom's cringe social media strategy. I think it's backfiring. I mean, he clearly wants to be the next president of the United States, but his social media strategy is just bizarre. He's trying to mimic Donald Trump. He's also selling merchandise with caps that say Newsom was right about everything, which is a bit of a joke. T-shirts that say Trump is not hot. You know, I think he should really be coming up with a better way to communicate than that. But you've even got Democrats, such as former DNC chair Donna Brazile, slamming Gavin Newsom for this strategy. Of course, his podcast is still up and running. And in his latest episode, he interviewed Democrat spokeswoman Jasmine Crockett. Listen to what she had to say.
And to be clear, you can wave all the flags you want to, but I am telling you right now that the most unpatriotic people that we have in this country are MAGA and this president. We are the real patriots, and it is time for us to take our flag back.
Emily, after the election last year, Gavin Newsom said that he wanted to learn where the Democrats, where they went wrong. And he spoke about essentially wanting to potentially win people back over. But this social media strategy of his and the podcast that he has, I don't think that's the way to do it. It also comes at a time while Democrats are facing a massive voter registration crisis.
Yeah, a huge voter registration crisis. They are now in quite a hole, as the New York Times documented last week. I totally had the same instinct as you, and I put that question to a Republican strategist I know last week, what is he doing? And the person made a really good point and said, basically, he's cleaning up in fundraising and name recognition. So for the early shadow Democratic presidential primary that's going on right now, which, by the way, is not Gavin Newsom's full-time job. He is, of course, the governor of one of the largest economies in the entire world. But he's also podcasting and, overseeing this weird social media campaign. That is something that may actually help him start getting donors and email lists and name recognition with Democratic primary voters. Now, of course, that's not what most people in California would say they want their governor to be doing right now. And it's not a winning strategy in a general election, that's for sure. If Gavin Newsom were running like this in 2028, if he secured the Democratic primary against someone like J.D. Vance, it would not be working for Gavin Newsom. But now if he's looking to just get his name out there, I guess no press is bad press for Gavin Newsom.
Yeah, I think he needs to go back to running California. I think California needs a lot of help, especially after those fires at the start of the year. The unemployment numbers are crazy. You've got the homelessness crisis. There are so many issues in California that I think Gavin Newsom should get back to work as opposed to hosting this podcast. But hey, let's keep following what he does. Finally, Hollywood star Chris Pratt has blasted these far-left lunatics who hate Donald Trump so much that they cannot celebrate any of his achievements. Listen to this.
I'd hate to be so mired in hatred for the president that any success from his administration is something I'd have an allergic reaction to. To be like, oh, well, if they do it, I don't want it to happen. I'll put Clorox in my children's cereal myself. It's like, come on, be reasonable here. There's certain things that would be a good thing to have. I want them all to be successful.
He makes a good point because that's what we're seeing at the moment. The Democrats are fighting anything Donald Trump does, even if it's good for the country.
Yeah, Chris Pratt would know. He married into the Kennedy family and probably gets his dose of that at family meals and Thanksgiving and holidays and such, where, even Robert F. Kennedy Jr., someone who has family, New York Magazine has a profile out right now on why the Kennedys have been so averse to celebrating legitimate wins by someone who is actually a member of their own family. And it's not just them, of course. That's illustrative of a broader problem on the left. And it didn't just come with Donald Trump. This is a problem that Americans had been dealing with as polarization increased in the last 10 to 20 years before Trump even. And hey, Trump just poured gasoline on the fire. We all got to see very clearly that the left was no longer able to celebrate the wins of the right if they happen. And even if, by the way, Donald Trump is not a typical Republican, even if they're the types of things that Democrats talked about for a very long time, even if they're actual ideological strains from the left, the left won't celebrate it anymore. So it's a strange time in America, that's for sure.
Emily Jashinsky, host of After Party with Emily Jashinsky on MK Media. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.